Hi, I'm David, and this is The Spark. The Spark is a series of interviews with industry professionals focused on their creative process and what inspires them. Our guest today is Jacques Thelemaque. Jacques is a writer, director, producer, and he's the president of a Los Angeles-based film collective called Filmmakers Alliance. I think watching this interview is going to give you some really great concrete advice on how to get started in the industry, so hope you enjoy. So Jacques, thanks for being with us today.
My pleasure. I look forward to chatting with you.
Tell me about Filmmakers Alliance. What is Filmmakers Alliance?
Filmmakers Alliance has evolved into a very large community of filmmakers. It started as basically a very straightforward collective. There was 8 of us, and we were working in various parts of the film industry, but we weren't actually making films. I was working as a writer, and people were doing other things, and my wife at the time was very interested in building community. So she suggested this idea of let's start an organization where we kind of just help each other, make films and pool our resources. That was kind of the key thing, because we all had different things to bring to the table. And we were very productive and prolific, actually. And 8 became 40, 40 became 100, 100 became 1,000. It grew very fast. And then we had to change the structure a bit. It was very difficult to work collectively when you had that many people. And we organized as a nonprofit and just became a full-fledged organization and built this community. And the basis of what we do is still peer-to-peer connection, still putting filmmakers together with each other and sharing resources. But that peer community has evolved into including, lawyers and sponsors and vendors and anybody who's part of the filmmaking universe is in our community. And so we can connect people with a pretty broad range of other filmmaker types or people in the filmmaking universe. But we also do events. Yeah, we do, we have tons of seminars, workshops, discussion groups, feedback screenings, all kinds of stuff that help people move not just their projects forward, but their filmmaking lives.
That's amazing. And you said you started with about 8 members. How many members are within Filmmakers Alliance today? Well,
we technically still have, we reached our peak pre-pandemic of 5,000, around 5,000. We still have those as members, but, we're launching a new community platform, so they will have to re-onboard. And that way we'll lose some members, but we'll start fresh and we'll have the most committed members. There's people who've drifted away from filmmaking, and then we'll onboard a bunch of brand new, exciting, fresh and shiny filmmakers.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So tell me a bit about the relaunch. What's involved with that? What's the plan there?
Well, we have we've always had, we've had for a long time an online presence. And but it was always secondary for us in a way. We didn't have a super dynamic platform, but we did so much offline. We did screenings and meetups and workshops and everything was online. And then of course when the pandemic hit, we had to take a step back from all that. And of course, as it was obvious to a lot of people, using just Zoom was very convenient and wasn't necessary to always meet for everything as we used to. And it also made us rethink our platform. We can provide a lot more for filmmakers, no matter where they are, online. So we just need to find a more dynamic platform, and we found one, and we're excited about it. And we're loading it up with stuff right now. Got a lot of stuff up there, but more to come. So we're excited about it.
So you mentioned that that typically the online presence wasn't as big of an aspect for you. Tell me a bit about the in-person events and seminars and classes that you do. Are they typically hosted out of Los Angeles?
Yes, we've done them we've done a lot of our meetings and meetups and seminars and stuff in various other parts of the country, usually in conjunction with a film festival where we have a presence. But most of our stuff is in Los Angeles, and those include regular seminars and meetups so the filmmakers can meet face to face, sort of socially. There's always business being conducted, but and we'll often have those at partner venues. It could be a theater we've worked with, or a vendor has the space to have us there. We did a party at Red one time. They have Red Studios here. So we've done all kinds of different ways of getting people together, but that face-to-face is kind of key. I mean, it's great to meet online, but the physical presence of people, sometimes it makes a huge difference in whether you want to work with them or not. So we want to put people together as often as possible. And now that we have this new dynamic platform, we want to sort of set up communities all around the country and eventually all around the world, where people can, we'll hand them a little package of here's how to put together a community where you are. And we'll start setting up those kind of communities all over the place. So looking forward to that too.
I want to ask you a little bit more about yourself and your story. What would you say got you started in your love of film to begin with?
Wow, that's a good question. And I've been asked it before, and the answer is always a little different. It's simply that, because I don't know 100%. I'm,
Sure.
speculating, looking back on it. But my father was a huge film lover. Not one he would define himself as that. It's not like that's all he did. He was an engineer. But he would often watch old movies on public television. They would have classic films, Japanese films, all these different things that you wouldn't normally see in your normal, theater, at least where I was growing up in Brooklyn. So he would watch these things, and I would watch them with him. And I just developed an appreciation for film as an art form, as a way of expressing things beyond just, the normal storytelling that I saw on TV. And, but also he bought a not Super 8, he had an 8mm camera when we were very young, and he used it all the time, and he let us use it. So we were playing with it, making stupid little kid movies. And yeah, there was always either watching films or making films aspect of our social life. And I come from a very creative family. My uncle's an artist, and I have people who played music, and there's just a lot of creativity around my family, and I think it was in my genes. So when I was looking for a way to express myself creatively, films were just what came to me. And I actually started in theater. I took some theater courses and directed a couple plays. And I quickly realized that the way I envision things is more cinematic than theatrical. And that was it. And so I applied to some film schools. I got into USC and went there for a year, and then transferred to UCLA. I went there for a couple of years and then transferred back to USC. That's a whole story. I was in the critical studies at USC, and I wanted to be in the production program. So I transferred to UCLA so I could be in their production program, and it was lacking. There wasn't a lot of funds for it, but they had a great writing program. So I started writing a lot, and I made a connection with one of my professors there, and he got me back into the production program at USC, because even though he was a professor at UCLA, he went to USC and had strong connections there, and he got me into the program there. And then another professor from UCLA took an interest in my work and made me part of her little, she had a little collection of writers that she sort of managed and worked with. And she took one of my scripts out to a big agent that she knows, and he liked it a lot and got me work. And so I never finished school. I got a job writing while I was still in college for Imagine Pictures, and that was it. Then I just was off on my professional life, and I was doing that for a while, a number of years. It was just a hired writer, and at first it was very exciting. I'm a young guy being paid to write scripts, and it was very exciting. I was paid well and had a good life, but you're just working at people's direction. It starts to feel like, because these were studio jobs and big production company jobs, and it wasn't stuff I was writing that I was passionate about, and I wasn't making films, I was writing.
Gotcha.
And so I met my wife, and soon after she's like, let's make movies. She was an actress, and of course she wanted to be in movies, and just figured like, let's make our own films, put ourselves, direct it, whatever. Let's make our own films. And that led to Filmmakers Alliance, as I described earlier, just very quickly, like within a couple of years. So, yeah.
Sounds like the equation worked out.
Yeah.
She wanted to be in movies. You wanted to make movies. It was, yeah.
And she was a very talented actress. So it was like, it would have been difficult if she was not talented. But I would have still loved her. But yeah, it was great that she was so talented.
You said for you that, writing was one thing that was fulfilling up to a point, but for you it was always, there was more to it. You wanted to be involved in sort of every step of the filmmaking production?
Yeah, like if you want to make films, it's, writing's just one part of it. Writers don't feel that way. They feel like,
Sure.
I'm creating everything. But, working with actors, realizing a script visually, playing with sound, editing it. I mean, these are all part of the creation process that really impact how a film feels and, the quality of it. And I wanted to explore all that, and I wanted to come up with stories and thematics that, that I cared about, not just, oh, here's a job, you're going to get paid X amount of dollars. We need this to happen by this point in the story, and these are the characters, like that sort of thing. And that's fun, and it can be lucrative if you're, working a lot, but it wasn't satisfying for me. It was exciting at first, and then it got old very quickly.
Was there ever a point where you felt the Filmmakers Alliance idea might not have been the right one, or was it a natural flow?
It was a natural flow. I had initial resistance to it because, I was a writer, and I was like, I'm going to write myself into directing. That was the course I sort of charted for myself.
Yeah.
And when my wife said, oh, like, step away from all that, it was a little scary and a little like, but the minute I embraced it, basically I told her, you get some people together and I'll do all whatever the heavy lifting you need me to do. Help organize it, whatever you need. And so she did. She got together 8 people, and we put together an agenda. But she quickly stepped away from management. She's a very inspirational leader, but my strength was in practical management. So we just divided up our energies in that way. She created a lot of the not just the inspirational, but the ideological energy around Filmmakers Alliance. Let's support each other. Let's push each other to the highest levels of creative achievement. And let's take risks creatively, all that kind of stuff. She was very much a voice for that, and I just sort of made stuff happen. So from that first meeting, though, it became religion for me. Like, it really was all I lived and breathed for many, many, many years. It's still, of course, a huge part of my life, but in those early years, it was like I went to bed thinking about it. I woke up thinking about it. I ate thinking about it. I was always, how can I help filmmakers? What can we add? What can we do? How do we organize this thing, that thing? Let's get a film made, stuff like that. It was just constant. And it felt like I was changing the world. Like that's the way I made it feel for myself.
Do you have a favorite genre, type of project or film to work on? Is there something that you have tended to gravitate towards, or are you kind of open to every type of film, every type of project?
I've become very open to a lot of different things. I've ended up working on everything from crazy art films that were shot with just 3 of us, to a big Coke commercial that I produced, and like all of them have their things about them that are fun and compelling or, satisfying in some way. But I definitely gravitate more towards indie films. They could be experimental, or they could be just genre films, but like films that are created and moved forward by like a singular vision. Somebody, a filmmaker who has, a very clear vision for what they want to do, and they want to do it within their own means of control. It's not some big studio giving them $1 zillion and they have to follow the map of the studio. And I like smaller crews too. I like working with smaller crews. These big giant productions that I've worked on where there's a zillion trucks and a zillion crew people, and those aren't always the funnest shoots. You know,
Sure.
They're not as personal.
Yeah. You mentioned community. I think a smaller crew maybe lets you feel that sense of community between the crew, where an AD is allowed to go talk to a lighting person about
Yes,
some
absolutely.
suggestion they have, or
Yeah.
the bigger the crew, the more this sort of segmentation
Yeah.
tends to happen, I think.
Or a PA, has an amazing idea, like get it out there. Like, doesn't matter where
Yeah.
it comes from, where you feel more of a sense of family. Now, I've been on some small productions that were highly dysfunctional, but, no different than any other kind of family. It's still family.
And as you said, you've worked for years in kind of every aspect of film production. Do you think there's anything that you've learned from your years of experience that you now pass on to other up-and-coming filmmakers?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, that's a big part of what I do, too, is speak about filmmaking. I speak on panels at festivals or, other filmmaking events, and I've done private consultations, and I just answer the call when people call me and ask questions. Of course, no one has all the knowledge because there's things change rapidly and new things pop up and new opportunities and new ways of doing things. But there are some basics that you learn over time, and it's stuff they don't teach you in film school. Sometimes you're surprised, like, how come you don't learn this stuff? That's a very protected environment. Mm-hmm. And they want to make sure that the filmmakers are cared for and that they're able to do what they want to do. But it'd be nice if they had classes that teach them what things are like a little bit in the real world, and have them do like internships, so they're out there just like seeing how it gets done. But yeah, you learn a lot of things that you want to pass on. It's weird that filmmakers are constantly having to reinvent the wheel. It's amazing that I get asked questions that they aren't finding online or through other people or on YouTube or whatever. Although a lot of that is starting to crop up a lot more. Like, there's a lot more education out there. There's No Film School, that website that has lots of great information. And of course, YouTube, you can find tons of instructional and educational videos around filmmaking. So there's a lot more that's out there. It may not be organized in a specific way, which we'd like to do on our platform. That's one of our goals, is to create a very clear organization of this information, and intuitive. But it's out there if people want to find it. And now there's Chat GPT, so you can get all kinds of information from that thing.
Yeah, some new information is coming our ways. Maybe some that we never asked for. But
That's right.
Yeah. I think you're right. I think you make a great point about film schools and film theory. Of course, there is a lot that can be gained from film school, but there's a remarkable amount when you actually work in the film industry of improvisation and kind of physical and tactile problem solving that I feel like a film school environment is never going to be able to give you experience with until you actually experience it and you realize that everyone's running around, everything is always happening on the fly.
People often ask me, should I go to film school? And I always say, yeah. I mean, I got a lot out of it. I didn't get everything out of it. And you have to just be clear about that. You're not going to get everything out of it.
Sure.
What I mostly got out of it was the relationships and the aesthetics. You have these classes where you're looking at amazing films and breaking them down and learning how to tell a story cinematically and use all the tools of a film to convey your ideas on multiple levels. That was really valuable. That's not necessarily something you're going to get out on the street, Mm-hmm. But there's that whole, like you said, the practical side, the street side, that is equally important, because you can have all these big ideas, but if you don't know how to bring them to fruition, they're not going to come across the way you envision in your head. And which was something I learned quickly in my first couple of short films. Oh my God, this doesn't look anything like the way I thought it was going to be. And the lighting, everything, you're like, I thought it was going to look this way. It doesn't quite look that way. And, learn these things by doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Tell me a bit about your skill sets. You've been a writer, you've been a director, and a producer. I assume many other credits in between, but let's talk about those three, the big ones.
Okay.
How do those skill sets overlap and how do they differ? Do you view them as three very separate streams, or is there cross-pollination?
Yeah, there is cross-pollination, but it really depends on the project. Like if it's something I'm creating for myself, then there's lots of cross-pollination. As I'm writing it, I'm thinking about, how are we going to get this shot, and how should I write this in a way that I know we can actually achieve it? I don't have the budget for huge effects or to shoot in downtown New York City, or you know what I mean. So I have to think in terms of like what I can actually make, and how I can realize it. As a director, what do I want to show that I can, as a producer, I know I can afford to show, and bring the crew necessary to it and all that kind of stuff. So yes, when I'm creating projects for myself, there's a lot of cross-pollination. But when I'm doing different projects, when I start writing something just to write because I have an idea and I want to write, I'm not thinking like that at all. I'm just like, I just want to write this idea. I have all these thoughts and images and scenes in my head, and I just want to write. And so I'm very focused on the writing. And if I'm producing something where I'm just a producer, then yeah, I'm just wearing my producer's hat. And luckily, because I've done these other things, I can have empathy for what a director needs and wants. And so I work very well with other crew members because I've been in their shoes. Gotcha. But still, you have to be the producer. You have to have a bottom line of like, this is the budget we have. This is what we can achieve with this budget. And I know you want to do this crazy thing and it sounds amazing, but you just can't do it. Like it's not going to happen, or you have to do it another way. That's always my sort of go-to, like rather than to say you can't do it. It's like, what's another way we can do this that will achieve sort of what you want to achieve within our means and budget. So yeah, definitely some cross-pollination, especially with projects I'm doing on my own. But, when I'm doing one specific job, not a lot of cross-pollination. I want to focus on, what that job needs, whether it's writing, directing, or producing.
So, I mean, you talked about a little bit about your creative process when you're writing or producing, and that's something that I really want to drill down into with this series. Is I really am fascinated with what makes a creative person like you tick. So tell me about what's an average good day for you creatively? Like what does it feel like when you have a new idea that you want to work on, and what is it about an idea that gets you motivated to work on it?
Well, that last question is a good one, and one that I haven't been asked often and difficult to answer. But the first part of that, I'll say, creativity, I feel like for the most part is something that you're born with, but I do think you can develop it in yourself. And I do think creativity shows up in a lot of different ways. For instance, my dad's an engineer, but he's a designer in his engineering, even though he's very much a math guy. In his designing of his engineering of systems, he has to create. He has to make connections between things, figure things out. It's a lot of problem solving, but problem solving takes creativity. You have to sort of figure out, here's the problem. What are all my options for solving that problem? And it's very similar in storytelling and writing screenplays and creating a movie. You're solving a lot of creative problems that demand creativity, and you're looking for elegant solutions, surprising solutions, shocking solutions. It's depending on where your creative perspective is, and where it's coming from. And for me, like a lot of the ideas are mysterious. I'll just be doing something, I don't know, just riding in a Uber, and suddenly these thoughts will come in my head, and 90% of them I just discard because, like, what, that crazy thought means nothing to me. But yeah, every once in a while one sticks and like, wow, that would be an amazing idea for a movie, or an amazing scene in a film I can put in this movie, or, just things just flow through my head and I selectively decide whether to keep them or not. I do tell people, when you get these ideas, record them into your phone or write them down as soon as possible. Because I got to tell you, I've lost thousands of what I thought were great ideas because I had them. I didn't save them anywhere in any way, and then they're just gone. And I've learned to not be so upset about that. It's just like, ideas just come, and more will come. So I lost that one somewhere. It went somewhere in the ether. But like, I don't, but another one will come. But yeah, they just hit you, and weird connections will hit you. I'll be talking to somebody in a conversation and something they say connects with something else I've been thinking about at a different time. Like, oh, those two things are a really interesting juxtaposition. And, I make note of it, try to find a place to write it down or record it. And then they just pile up, these things pile up, and somehow they work themselves into various stories, ideas, script ideas or full on scripts, they find their way into my work.
What is your typical method of recording, or is it kind of whatever's available to you? Are you a big notes app user, or?
Yeah, I'll just use voice memo on my phone. That's the most common one for me because it's just easy. It's in my hand always, or in my back pocket, and nice. Just pop it out. Sometimes I'll use notes also on my phone. I don't carry on my computer all the time. My phone is usually what's with me. So, and I don't have an iPad, shockingly. So I will write them sometimes. Sometimes writing is just the way the ideas come out is better for me. And other times just speaking them into my voice memo is enough. But yeah, the point is just like record them somehow, even if it's just fractured pieces of it, just so you can recall it later.
And you mentioned the moment of uber inspiration, which I love. But what for you is like the ideal creative conditions? Do you have a dedicated space you work in? Like, what's your kind of ritual? What's your habit for doing creative work?
I guess for me, the ideal circumstance is just being able to focus and not be too distracted, but because I can be easily distracted, especially by the practical details of managing Filmmakers Alliance, or just getting through the day, your normal personal life, and relationships with friends and things they need. So like not having a lot of distraction is really important to me. And shockingly, and this is surprising to a lot of people, I work best in bed. I really do. When I just take my computer and lie in bed, and I get a ton done. And whenever I have to go to an office and sit at a desk, I don't get as much done. I often get distracted by other things, or I'm just not so comfortable, or I don't know why. Ideas don't flow the same way for me when I'm sitting at a desk as they do when I'm like sort of prone. I don't know why that is, but I've learned that about myself and I just accept it.
But that answer is exactly why I asked the question, because I think that could be different for everybody. But I am really interested in people who have abnormal conditions, maybe, quote unquote, that might inspire the best thinking. For sure, I do too. So
I have friends who can't write unless they're in a public space. Like they either go to like WeWork or a coffee shop, whatever. That's where they can write and they get ideas. I don't. To me, it's just the opposite. I get very distracted in those places. Everybody's different. Everybody's creative process is different.
So in your role as a producer, obviously you have read many scripts. Is there things that you see in scripts that other people have written that you love or don't love?
Oh, yeah, always. I'm always finding things. I guess what's frustrating to me is sometimes I'll see scripts that have so much promise and potential, and it gets undone in one way or another. Like maybe the character development isn't completely there, or the ending just falls apart. Everybody's, it just goes into maybe a really traditional or not surprising ending at all. And so when it's been so interesting and surprising the whole way through, and then suddenly they try to wrap it up with,
Nice
something.
happy ending.
Yeah, they try to tie a bow on it, and it's like, oh, this is not a film that needs a bow. Like so there's always something that a lot of these scripts leave me a little bit wanting and frustrated. But there's always conversely, there's always something really amazing. It's like, oh my God, what a great character, what a complex character this person created, or what a great story thread that's pulling me along. So yeah, it's like, I think the thing that I like to see best in the scripts that I read is surprise. Something that introduces me to something that I haven't seen or felt before. So it could be a thematic idea, it could be an emotion, it could be just a character or a story construct I'd never seen before. It could be a formal structural thing that has been played with in a way that I just never seen and find exciting. But there's always something that I find amazing in a mostly well-written script. Now, I've read tons of just impossible to read scripts that are just not very good, but but I'm talking about this kind of scripts that I respond to.
Is there something tangible that you can describe? Maybe a tough question, but is there something that you can tell within a well-written script kind of early on? Is there sort of signposts that you think are there versus a script that you think may be prone to problems?
Yeah, there's so many of those, actually. When you first launch into a script, early on, you can start to see whether it's something you want to continue reading or you want to just close and put away. Mm-hmm. And, that's everything from the way it's formatted to the names of the characters to, the type of dialogue. I've been surprised sometimes. I've read a couple scripts that are like, this might be either the worst script I ever read or the most ingenious one I've ever read. And you read further and you find out which one it is. But that's rare. Most of the time, these indicators are exactly what the script is. Like, okay, this is like the spellings are just terribly spelled and everything's, and I know that sounds very superficial and everything, but it matters in terms of how much care the person writing is putting into the work. So if they're not putting a lot of care into these superficial details, often they're not putting a lot of care into the character development, into the story structure, into, finding surprising and interesting ways to tell the story. So usually those early indicators prove to be, correct in the quality of the script.
Yeah. That's very good tip. So pay attention to every detail and give every detail an equal amount of love. Yeah.
Yeah. And it takes sometimes going through the script multiple times. I mean, I've written scripts where I've done, 10, 12 drafts. And just before I send it out to people, I see spelling mistakes. I'm like, how did I miss that with the spell checks and everything? How is it possible? But so you have to kind of go through multiple times, and sometimes that can make the difference in your script, in terms of character depth and complexity. You're like, oh, I can add this whole other layer. I've read it now, it's working, but if I put this little thing in there, it's going to add a different shading and a different kind of complexity and different level of involvement for the reader. And that you gotta give it the time and attention. Yeah.
I've heard the advice given to novel writers, book writers, but I think it definitely applies to screenplays as well, and maybe it's out there, but to actually take whatever draft you think is a finished draft, put it in a drawer, and then walk away from it for maybe a week at least.
Yeah.
And then take it out from the drawer, do that physical act, and then give it another read with, hopefully you've given yourself a set of fresh eyes. Before you take another editing pass, and that may very well kind of reveal some weaknesses that still might be in there or areas that you could improve.
Yeah, it's really hard to be objective about your own work. You get attached to characters, you get attached to scenes, lines of dialogue, all these things that you get sort of attached to. and you can't imagine them not being a part of your script. And so you need to break that connection at some point and get the objectivity that allows you to go in, you know, with a very cold-hearted approach and just say, look, it's a awesome line of dialogue. It just shouldn't be here. Yeah. And this scene is great. This character is great, but they're just not making this story work. So, and it's hard to do that. It really is hard to do that. And you do need the space. So I would agree with that bit of feedback. Like, you know, do what you need to do to break that connection a little bit so you can go back in and look at it very clear-eyed and without being attached to all these things.
Can you describe what you think holds the most people back from their creative goals within the filmmaking space?
I think humans in general, for all the crazy stuff that we do, are risk averse. Mm-hmm. And so it's the risks involved with being creative scare a lot of people away, being judged, you know, putting a bunch of energy into something and it not paying off the way they'd hoped. Or a financial risk. If you make a film, it's very expensive. Even if you're doing it yourself on a very small level, it still costs money. So a lot of these things, or the time you take to get involved with a film that you would take away from saying something that might pay you money. Because often when you're doing independent stuff, you're not getting paid. You're just doing it for the love. So a lot of these things are barriers to exploring that life, you know, and it really takes people whose passion for doing it circumvents any kind of stoppage. Like you just like, I just have to do it. Like for me, like I got to tell you, like I don't always love writing. You know, it's a very lonely thing, and you're sort of off in your head a lot, and it's frustrating working out creative problems and stuff. But I have to. Like I just can't not do it. It's in me. And so these thoughts and ideas and stories just flow. And if I don't express them, I'm 10 times more frustrated than if I ignore them and do other stuff. So I have to do it. And when you have a passion for creating at that level, it's inescapable. You know, all the excuses and fears and stuff just melt away. You just have to do it. And you can develop that slowly. You know, a lot of these things that I talk about are not things that just have to be in you. You can develop them slowly, a little bit at a time. Like, okay, you don't have to write a feature script. You can write a short, and you know the creative energy feeds on itself. You start to develop confidence that that you can do it, that you can make stuff, and that you can express your ideas, and it starts to build, and then. You know, because I wasn't always driven to make films and write stories like I am now. It's doing it a lot. You realize that it's a form of expression that now is very common to me and very comfortable. And I need to do it because I know I can do it.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think the fear of a project is invariably highest before you've started it. And I think the act of doing anything that you feel in any way nervous about, almost always those fears just start to quickly melt away as the process is underway.
And that's the great thing about, you know, sitting down and writing the script, because you sort of, to some degree, envision the film before you've made it. So you can focus on that rather than all the scary steps in between. You're like, okay, I can see this film in my head, so I am going to work through whatever problems I need to work through to realize this story cinematically. And it's your blueprint. You know, it guides you through everything and creates some clarity in your head as to, you know, what this is going to be, and motivates you to move past all the fears and practical issues that will crop up along the journey.
Yeah, that's a great answer. And Jacque, what do you have projects that you're working on nowadays that excite you? I mean, I don't want you to get into any spoilers if you can't give them, but anything coming up for you?
I wrote a couple things during the pandemic that I definitely need to get out into the world, but I have not yet done that. And then I have a couple older scripts that I've been wanting to make for myself, that I also need to push forward. And so I have 2 feature scripts and 2 television shows that I wrote the pilots for, that I want to get out into the world. One is a limited series, and one is could be ongoing for, and then 2 sort of very indie oriented, relationship character driven pieces that I wrote. One is much bigger budgeted, and there's a lot of effects and things in it, and the other one is more intimate, the personal. And then I'm also working on a narrative show for which we just bought the life rights to, of a sort of a well-known figure who a documentary's been made about her, and a few other things. That's a lot of articles, and maybe a book I think is coming out. And we just got the life rights, so I'm excited about that. And
nice.
yeah, I mean, she was born a young boy and grew up in a really dysfunctional house, and became a drug addict and killed someone at 16, was sentenced to life in prison, and was transferred to a hardcore adult prison when she was 18, still he at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And then they transitioned while in prison, and that's a whole story. So that transition is an amazing story, and that she was able to do all the things she needed to do to free herself. She's now out of prison, is amazing. And this is not to downplay the victim of her crime. She's not claiming to be perfect, and takes full responsibility for what she did. But it was an amazing transformation, not just her physical transformation, her emotional and psychological and intellectual transformation is amazing, especially considering what went on in her childhood life, which was a lot of dysfunction and abuse. So we're doing parallel stories of how she got to where she was, and then what she did after she was in prison.
Is this a film you said, or a series? Sounds
series.
Like there's a lot of stories to tell. Yeah.
Yeah. The limited series.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, fascinating. How do you feel nowadays about what I would call the landscape of opportunity for young and upcoming filmmakers, TV creators? What do you feel like the lay of the land is nowadays, and what opportunities are out there, and how is it changing?
Yeah, that's a complicated question, because there's so much opportunity, but there's still challenges. There's still gatekeepers. There's still, a lot of old school stuff that's always been there to make it hard to have a thriving life as a filmmaker, however you see that. But I like to focus on the positives, and that there is a lot of opportunities. All these platforms, streaming platforms that are doing original production, and so they're looking for projects. They're looking for filmmakers to attach to projects they already have. And then there's, all these social media platforms where you can create content for that. So even if there's nothing happening for you professionally, nobody's paying you, you still have a place to create stuff and get it out into the world, and maybe build an audience that way that can lead to other things. I've heard that story a number of times. So there's just a lot of opportunity to not just create, but to get that work seen. And then there's the old school way of just getting together a bunch of money from whoever will give it to you, and making a short film and having it play festivals, and people recognizing your talent and willing to go next level with you for other films or a feature, or, so there's lots of opportunity. And, but it's really important to figure out what your voice is and how you can distinguish yourself from all the other stuff that's out there, and there's really only one way to do that. And that's to understand what's distinctive about you as an individual. Every story's been told a million times, a million different ways. And even though you hear stories and you're like, oh, that sounds new, it sort of sounds like something else that existed before. But nobody is telling it like that filmmaker. Nobody is writing it and or directing it, realizing it cinematically the way that person can do it. And so, that's the key really, is to find your distinctive creative voice and then inject it into, whatever story you're passionate about telling. And you will find the platform for it. Like you just will, whether it's making an old school film that just plays at festivals or on social media or a TV show or whatever. There's a platform for a really distinctive idea that's well realized.
How would you say an organization, a collective like Filmmakers Alliance, how does that help the young and up-and-coming filmmaker who wants to break in? Tell me about the impact of that feeling of community versus the lone wolf.
There's a lot of filmmakers who feel like they need to be a lone wolf. I'm an auteur, it has to be my idea. I don't want anybody else to touch it or comment on it or anything. It's like, my genius has to be pure. And to some degree, I embrace that because I do think, too many cooks in the kitchen can spoil an amazing meal. And you do want a singular vision guiding a lot of these things. The problem is that it's too few people are geniuses. Like if you're a genius, you can come up with stuff that nobody else will come up with. But like most of us, if you're just an extremely creative person, the feedback around you is super important. The creative contributions that you get from your community are super important. So we provide support on a few different levels. One's very practical support. You need production forms, you need the crew database, you need, where do I get insurance, all that stuff. Very important. And we provide that as well. And also educational support, like where can I learn about this? Where can I learn about that? Oh, well, here's this mentor, here's this consultation, here's this YouTube video, like to point you in the right direction. And so we give support on that level too. But the most important for me, the most important support is the creative community support. Like, here's my script, give me some feedback, and you get all this amazing feedback. Here's this thing I'm thinking of doing. Well, I wouldn't do that. Like whatever. You can take people's feedback for whatever it's worth, but it still opens your eyes and gets you thinking about different things. And people will throw their own ideas at you, and maybe it's not right for your project, but maybe there's that one little idea like, oh my God, that would be amazing. 90% of what you said, I'm not interested in at all, but that takes my project to the next level. So like, it's all like really key stuff. So you can have feedback screenings. Your film's already shot, but it's sort of edited and into a hot mess, so you show it to a bunch of filmmakers and they're like, oh, if you did this and did this, focused on that, take out this, you don't need that subplot, blah, blah, blah. And suddenly your film's transformed. And it's even better at the script level before you've spent the money and all that kind of stuff. And so, the creative energy you get from the community around you is, to me, like priceless. And that's how you get stuff. That's how you take your work to the next level.
Okay, great. Well, I've got a few quick wrap-up questions. Any recent films or TV shows you've seen that you've loved?
Oh, God, there's so many. I always blank on these kinds of questions, like the specific ones that I've seen. But there's so much great TV right now, like almost too much. Like I don't have time to see it all. But there's so many great shows that this is really, to me, the golden age of television, because these are all like indie films that are stretched out over, several episodes, sometimes several seasons. You didn't used to see TV like this back when I was growing up, where they explore adult themes and they talk like adults and they, there's complicated characters. And I think that's becoming a standard, at least in the cable and streaming world. And so the quality of TV, I think, is amazing. And some of these shows are just, and whether they're genre shows or, comedies or, complicated dramas, you don't see like hardcore art and experimental stuff, but you do see, you do see a lot of really smart, intelligent, engaging, compelling work on television these days. And then in the theatrical world, I feel like from the indie perspective, things have gotten a little conservative. Like you're not seeing as often stuff that just like, wow, I've never seen something like that before. I
Yeah.
feel like I've said that to myself in the past on a number of occasions, but I don't see that as much anymore. I think a lot of independent filmmakers are angling to get jobs in television, or or they're just used to telling stories in a more traditional way. So I still get really excited when I see something that's where they've played with the formal structure of the narrative in a really unique way, or characters that surprise you, or you know, or challenge you in ways that you wouldn't be challenged by a normal film. But it's out there. There's a lot of good stuff out there.
As far as helping out other filmmakers and creators, which you do all the time, is there any common resources that you tend to point them towards? Or, I mean, you mentioned Filmmakers Alliance itself has its own library of resources.
Yeah. Yeah, I usually just drag them into Filmmakers Alliance and they'll find what they need there. But it really, yeah, it also just depends on where they are. There's people who are at the writing stage, and so they need a whole different universe of resources than somebody who has a film that they're trying to get distributed. So it really depends on what their need is and where they are. Then there's the people who are part of our community who never want to make a film. They just want to work on a film, and maybe they're a composer or they're an editor. And, it's just, there's so many facets to the filmmaking universe. There's brand filmmaking, where you're making films for brands, so it's sort of like a commercial, that's a whole other community. So it really depends on, the type of work they want to do and where they are in the process of that work, where I can point them to, the best resource for that sort of thing. But again, to me, it always comes down to community. Like, who are the people you need to surround yourself? And they don't have to join Filmmakers Alliance. Like, just find that community yourself or build it yourself. Bring the people around you that you need to help you. Because filmmaking on any level, in any way, whether it's, short film or brand entertainment or whatever, you still need partners. You still need community. It's always a collective endeavor, and you need the genius of a lot of different people. It's no matter how much of an auteur you think you are, you're meaningless without people who can execute things for you on a very high level. And it is really great to have like a great producer who can raise money and help you get the film out into the world. So yeah, you need partnerships, you need community, you need people. And so that's what I always go back to, like, find the people that you need to have around you.
You mentioned a while back this idea of being risk averse, and that is kind of one of the greatest challenges and barriers to entry to any sort of creative person. What would you say, what advice would you give that might help somebody who like wants to get started but is just feeling that risk aversion, sort of overcoming their desire to actually get started?
Baby steps. I always tell people baby steps. Take your iPhone and shoot like a simple little scene with you and your friends. If you're not an actor, get a couple of people who can act and just shoot a little scene. Shoot stuff for TikTok. Just do stuff that where you're walking down the road of creating, a grand piece of cinema, but like at a very small, accessible level, and then you build confidence. And ideas come to you, and you realize, okay, if I did it this way, next time it's going to look this way. And if I had done this, you learn from these early endeavors, and don't be afraid to make the mistakes. If you make them on a really small level, the consequence is small, but the growth is huge. So you just go out and do stuff, at the level that you can do it and feel safe doing. And then in the actual creativity, then you take the risks. That's where the risks are, but those will pay off because you learn from them. And so yeah, baby steps.
Well, Jacques, this has been a great chat, and I could talk to you for hours, but I think we should wrap it up there for now. maybe we can do this again sometime.
I would love to. It's been my pleasure, and I'd be happy to do it again.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jacques, and we'll see you soon.
All right. Thanks, David.